Hello, and welcome to Oscilloscope, a monthly evening of experimental electronic music. My name's Ed Wright. I'm joined this month by Dominic Chennell as co-host. How are you, Dominic? I can't hear you. He's disappeared. Dominic, yeah, put your headphones on quick. Hello, can you hear me now, Dominic?
Yes, I can.
Oh, brilliant. Don't do that to me. I had a heart attack. Good. There's nothing like starting as one means to go on. Yeah, how are you? Are you well?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm enjoying being two-jabbed channel.
Yes, absolutely. So to fill people in, you've literally had your second vaccine injection this afternoon.
I have 6 weeks early. I feel very privileged and proud to have tricked the system to give me one in advance. No,
good. Well done.
So I jumped in the queue and got another one done. So you can all feel safe in my presence tonight.
Good. So a slight bit of absent-mindedness with headphones, we can let you off then.
You.
Good. So yeah, as is the tradition with these sorts of things, we tend to have a non-electronic music specialist, brackets in inverted commas, as somebody to co-host with us. However, for those people who've been around a lot of the sort of particularly North Wales art scene, but the general British art scene, you'll be something of a familiar face. So I mean, how would you describe your background and practice and where you're up to today, really?
Well, so my background is visual arts, really. That's where I come from, working in the contemporary arts, visual arts sector. And from that, there's this thing of sound art, an element of sound art coming from the visual arts tradition, and that's where I got involved, really. So about 10 years ago, I set up a project called Soundlands that really, it brings in international sound artists from around the world to Wales, sometimes working with Welsh artists, and does the kind of commissioning that ends up in a performance or an installation, normally in a public place, right in the middle of Snowdonia or perhaps in a seaside town, and it's given us in Wales an opportunity to really get to grips with some of the best international sound art around the world, and sometimes sent some of our Welsh sound artists out again, quite often engaging with the community in quite meaningful ways. It's been great. It's been really good fun doing that.
Absolutely. And it's been, I mean, it's been really inspiring seeing what's happened with Soundlands, and it's also been really great to have sort of partly benefited from that directly, and indeed from that sort of momentum that everybody's sort of generated over that period of time, which has been really good. So thank you.
One of the first times wasn't the first time I met you, but one of the first times was getting you to come and see a piano in my front garden that we were then transport to Bangor and ceremoniously burn as part of a project with Anna Lockwood. It was great.
Yes, absolutely. No, it's great fun. And wonderfully, quite exciting trying to play these things as they are actually on fire, which was a memorable experience, shall we say.
Flames lit around your fingers.
Yes, I mean, they literally were. I think people were pretty much going no get away from that now by the end of it. Anyhow, we're digressing, but it's very good to have you here. But I'm sure we could reminisce for quite a long time. So this evening, we have coming up a wonderfully multicultural set of artists. Given that you, Dominic, mentioned having international artists, I think we pretty much almost exclusively are. So we have 4 artists with their work coming up. We have Pablo Perez, we have Cecilia Sir, Andrea Andrich, and Anil Suba, who, apart from Andrea, are all new people to Oscilloscope. So it's great to be able to welcome them. We'll hear their work in turn and have a chance to chat with them. So for people who've not been involved or watched this before, please feel free to put any questions or whatnot in the comments, and myself and Dominic will try and pick them up and put them to the artists as we chat with them about their work afterwards. One honourable mention I should make before we start was we were initially supposed to be joined by Ryan Jordan for a new piece of his, who's a UK-based sound artist, was originally from Ipswich, did a lot with De Montfort University, and 2006 was the person behind starting Noise Equals Noise. So for those of you who are involved in this, you may well recognize the name and some of the backstory. But he, as is the way with lots of people at the minute, and the end of lockdown, he started a new job and things just haven't quite clicked in. So Ryan, thank you very much for trying to be part of it. Congratulations on your new job. And if you're listening, great. Hopefully we can hear something from you at some point in the not too distant future. And I really am starting to ramble. So without further ado, we have a wonderful work from Pablo Perez coming up, which is a modular synthesis-based track. And yeah, Pablo's kind of known for creating these sort of kaleidoscopic, rhythmic, glitchy textures from his instrument. And it's actually really, having seen this piece sort of relatively recently in the sort of last sort of 24 hours or so, really quite nicely glitchy and yet melodic at the same time. Anything you want to add to that? Because I know you've been trying to dive into some of the backstories of some of these musicians, Dominic. Anything you've found or noticed about him, or indeed had the chance to find?
Nothing really. I'm just quite intrigued as how I'm going to feel having sort of discovering this new piece live. That's going to be new to me. No, I'm going to wait till afterwards, I think. Okay,
brilliant. In which case, we have Pablo Perez and a track that seems to be given the working title Oscilloscope. We may find out if it has another title when he appears afterwards. So, Pablo, thank you very much.
you. Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you very, very much, Pablo. What a wonderful track.
Oh, thank you so much. And I'm so honored to be here. And I want to thank you for just having this platform here for artists to, do their thing.
It's a real pleasure to kind of have you here. And I seem to have a duplication on the stream somewhere. There we are. Right. Sorry, I could hear everything twice. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us, Yeah, anything you want to say about the track before we sort of have a natter about it? Because it's obviously come to us quite fresh. I mean, I'm guessing that was recorded pretty much a few days ago, or
yeah, pretty much. It's always a surprise to me. I guess there's like two parts of me. One is the person that's playing in the moment.
Yep.
And it's kind of like this magical place, right? Where you explore and travel in this weird time-space continuum, and things just happen, and you let things happen. And somebody could tell me, like in my earlier works, if you listen to my earlier works on Bandcamp, it's a lot more kind of more aggressive, a lot of heavy rhythms.
Yeah.
And something happened through the COVID. It changed me. It just changed who I am internally. And this is just kind of what comes out, right? And then there's the intellectual side that I can look at it and kind of try to analyze, like, what's going on here, And I think a lot about like this concept of broken things, And during this, you look at society, and especially here in the U.S., like a lot of crazy political things happening, and you feel like this sense of like social structure is breaking down, COVID, and how do you respond to that, right? So my response is like, hey, maybe we need to learn how to take these broken things and reassemble them into things that are meaningful to us. So like broken sounds of machines and society and everything, and turning it around. And in this piece, you could hear like this layer of, I don't know, just looking at it from the outside, almost like a layer of hope of this like floating thing on top of it with this continuous glitch. And there's also just a personal soothing factor to me. It's like helps me kind of meditate on this strange meditation machine.
Okay, I mean that really came across, especially this sort of meditative side to it and that sort of thing. I mean, a lot of what we find with modular synthesis type stuff, a lot of people put a lot of time into thinking, I'm going to have this set up and have this patch and this thing and then do this. I mean, to what extent is yours an improvised exploration or a meditation, or how much of that was kind of pre-planned before you started?
So basically my process is, if I'm going to do something like this, I'll just rip out all my chords.
Yay!
And because what happens is I'll play something, and then I'll start to feel like these patterns occurring. Yep. And I feel like things get more interesting when you don't know what's going to happen. And early on in modular synthesizers, there was a path where I've seen people who literally have books and they write down each knob, like each setting. And before their gigs, you see them looking at their books, setting on like, or I could just learn to hear the sound and cultivate it, right, in real time. And I chose that path. So everything I do is improvised and kind of in the moment. But I start off usually with a patch that I say, okay, this is a starting point, and now I'm going to go on this journey and see where it takes me.
So you kind of got some sort of structure there, in that you've got that patch that that you can go back to and rely on as a starting point. But then so to what extent is that a structure for you musically, or is that literally something that can give you a sound, or is that, say, a sequence, or a bit of both?
So even like going back is difficult, because I'll change settings and I can't go back to those settings. And it probably has to do with a lot of, like, in the past, I'm like a bass player. I was a trained bass player, and I played jazz and rock and session work, right? And as a bass player, there's a lot of like you tend to be a support for the band, right? And it's an important role. And so you're following a lot, right? And this modular was like, oh wow, I could kind of control everything, right? I could really kind of cut loose, right? And then I've always, even back when I was a teenager, like we were playing, Black Sabbath and Judas Priest, I was always like, oh, what if I scratch my pick on my bass? And I used to put paper clips and tie them on my bass, and like, without even knowing about who even John Cage was or anything, I just did that. I was just always like wanted to push the boundary of what I was doing. And so this thing just makes total sense for me.
Cool. Dominic, I've talked for far too long. Jump in, please.
Well, I was really surprised, because I was expecting something much more harder edged and as complex to play between rhythms and textures maybe, but that was so beautiful, and it was a really lovely listen.
Thank you.
I mean, it was completely airy at the same time, but really a really pleasant experience, which is great. And also it was, for me, it felt quite filmic. It was a bit like I was in some 70s Jacques Cousteau underwater movie, and I kept seeing all these images in my head of so many different things, and I wondered whether, when you're creating something like that, are you imagining or encouraging me to see things in my head, visual things, or are you expecting it to be much more of a cerebral experience?
So I have a history of visual arts where I was a painter for a long time, and I think very visually. My father was an artist, and so it's the visual component has always been there. And it's funny because even music, I think visually as well. And I sometimes have to challenge that because it could get in the way of my listening versus my visual, but it's always there. There's a component. So I kind of think in terms of, and I've even heard people say like, oh, you name your songs like paintings, and I think of like sound as paint, and it took a little bit of an evolution to de-learn what you're supposed to do. Oh no, you have to be like on the beat this way, and you have to like play in key. You have to like, because I learned traditionally, I know music theory. I've had these string arrangements, right? But to unlearn that and think of it more like paint, and that's how I paint, like layers, right? And putting it, and then how do you make those layers intertwine with each other? And then like, how do you create a soundscape where it brings you to a different place rather than just a technical kind of, exercise?
That's so interesting, because I've experienced the same thing of feeling inhibited by any music training that I've got in listening and making sounds freely. And you actively using your different visual arts perception as a way into that and a way of solving that issue. That's so interesting to hear. Yeah,
it's so hard to unlearn something.
Yes.
And you have to like really actively, I'm so grateful because my father as an artist, he would take us to, he said, grab your Mickey Mouse pads. We had our little Mickey Mouse drawing pads, and we're going to go drawing, right? We're going to go draw some nature. And we're like, oh, cool. And he took us to like a empty dirt lot with nothing there. And he says, all right, let's draw. I'm like, Dad, there's nothing here. He goes, oh no, there's like a lot here. There's a lot here. You just got to look, right? And so he sat there bored and frustrated. But then all of a sudden, like, oh, there's a little tiny plant. Oh, there's a little rock. There's a bottle. There's right? And next thing you know, we're like drawing all, and then you start to like, almost like in a magical way, all these things start to appear that you didn't even see. And it's like, wow, like, so like those kind of lessons, right? Where you have to like let go of like this kind of past thinking to go get to a new way of thinking. And it's hard. And it's, I'm grateful that I had like, him as kind of a guide in the sense of that. Or even as we painted, he would say, turn your painting upside down and look at it, And it's like, oh, that's like totally like a whole thing. It should work that way too, right? It should. So I try to incorporate those little exercises too in music.
I wanted to work the other way around, where a visual artist was feeling constrained by a classical visual arts training, and they could use sounds in a way to free themselves up. Yeah, interesting thought.
One comment that's come through from Sword Swinging Robot. There's a bit of a question for you. Amazing performance. Do you press record at the start of the patch, or work until you feel the flow emerging? Which, yeah,
I press record, and then I start, and just kind of let it go and flow. And the thing, you know, there's a certain thing about like it's capturing a moment, right? And I find sometimes even the unplanned things, the quote mistakes, right, that I think today, like, I kind of cringe. I look when I go back and I go, wow, that was kind of cool. That was interesting. You know, that was like probably the most interesting part of that thing. And so I'm almost like building on mistakes over and over. So I rather kind of capture that moment. And this is truly where I am today. And it's a document to that moment, and then move on to the next thing. And then you document the next moment and just keep going. So hopefully that answered his question.
Yeah, I think so.
You look like you're really enjoying yourself, which is so fantastic and infectious. And I wonder if you think back to when you were playing jazz bass guitar, which gave you most pleasure, that or what you've just done now?
You know, the journey of like exploring an art form gives me so much pleasure, right? And there was, you know, I used to spend like 6 hours a day practicing my bass, and it was a very intense training, and I loved it, right? I really enjoyed it, but I got to a moment where I found myself like playing Louie Louie at a weddings and going to the session and playing someone's really bad music, and that's when I started to not enjoy it. And I literally like kind of took a moment in my life, and I invested all this time, and I go, but it's not really what I want to do. And I said, you know what, I'm going to start painting. And I decided to become a painter. and then did that for a while. And I feel like sometimes when I get to this, there's almost this professional level where now it's about like other people and they're paying you money, and things change a little bit. So I kind of having my job and then doing this the way I want to do it, which brings a lot of joy. So I look fondly back on all my experiences, and they've all led up to today. So I don't look back and say, oh, I wish I was there. And I don't look here today and say, oh, I'm glad I'm not there. It's all like one thing for me.
And you don't want me to invite you to my wedding then to play the music for the crowd?
The best wedding I ever played was a friend of mine and said, just bring your bass and play whatever you want. Yeah. And I just played bass alone, and I was doing like walking lines in the background and everything, and people really dug it. You know, it was really fun.
That's really cool. Yeah, that seems like an ideal place to sort of wrap things up, as yeah, we're sort of slightly pushed for time, but that's just like really inspiring, and yeah, really great to see you actually enjoying stuff so much and having that sort of outlook on the world of kind of parking lots and small flowers and things. So I mean, yeah, have we missed anything that you feel is absolutely vital that you want to get out about that? Or
if you're ever come to Los Angeles, I'm in Venice Beach, please come and visit and say hello. We have a big experimental music community out here, and we're very welcoming. So, and we'd love to like reach out and connect all over the world.
Totally. That's brilliant.
Thank you. And thank you
Pablo
again.
Perez. Oh, it's
great
a pleasure
talking to both of you.
That really was greatly enjoyable. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm all of a warm, fuzzy glow now.
Yeah.
Yeah. How are you, Dominic? Are you bearing up with your injection?
I am. I'm feeling a bit stiff in the shoulder, but you know.
Oh dear.
Do some dance exercises or something soon.
Yes, absolutely. So that's a hard thing to follow up. But next up, we have. I've got a quick message from Charles as we are slightly pushed for time. I believe we're having Matt in to have a quick natter about a crossover remix. And yes, so very quickly in dispatches, we're chopping around through things. For those of you who may well remember, a couple of months back, we had a crossover collaboration with Modulate, so another local group to up here, and whereby we did a kind of project where the two groups of people did or worked together to produce different tracks, and in the styles of different things. So Oscilloscope being far more experimental and Modulate being far more force of the floor modular. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome Matt Garnett as the representative of Modulate in, who is very quickly diving in. As I understand, he has parental responsibilities popping up at any moment. So we've done a very quick rejig of times for things, so he can go and be parental Matt. Hello, how are you, sir?
Very good, thank you very much. It's great to be on the show.
It is great to have you back again.
What a wonderful way to start. That was such a fascinating interview with Pablo, and if we could all look at the world a little more like his dad did, wouldn't it be a better place? Yeah,
I believe it would. I gave a very, very stumbling account of what we did with the crossover kind of project. Would you care to be a bit more eloquent, a bit from your experience of being involved with it? You know.
Yeah, I think we've been talking for a while about, we're kind of neighbours, aren't we, really? And so we've each got our online platforms, but we hadn't had a lot of crossover. I guess Rob Etch-a-Sketch had played for you a couple of times, and you guys have sort of played at our events, but we haven't quite managed to cross over in the digital realm yet. But so it was kind of a pick teams and swap over. So a bunch of us came and played on your show, and then a bunch of your regulars came and played on ours, and it was such a fascinating, I think, just the process. It wasn't about just the end goal, the end performances. It was such a wonderful process. All the chats that we had about the different anxieties that people had. We had the, I think Charles being like, how do I write 4/4 music? I can't, this is hard. And we're like, how do I can't write something without drums, or I just really want to put a 303 on it. Oh no. So, but it was great to see that we were all outside of our comfort zones. And then, but equally in a nice, supportive, larger comfort zone. And then, so we had those performances, and then just because we're having so much fun, we thought it would be great to do the remix challenge as well, which was a totally different kind of discipline again, where it went from what can you perform live to, all right, here's a track, what are you going to do with it? And
so I mean, essentially, for people who might not have heard that bit, that we basically had the tracks, didn't we? And then we essentially played swap a track with each other. We had a bit of an online vote,
and it wasn't like
who were involved in that.
That was it. There was the online vote, so we were all debating, trying to, am I going to get to remix?
It's great fun.
It was such a great process, sort of different from any other remix I've done, where you would choose the track that you wanted to remix, and then you would get stems. And this one was, here is a track, no stems. What are you going to do with it? So again, it was just that I'm out of my comfort zone, and it's up to your kind of creativity. What are you going to do to turn it into something that puts a little of your spin? And I think everybody came out with such fantastic there's such a diversity of sound on both the original and then the remixes. The way that they were flipped, and it was a really lovely thing to be a part of.
And I believe that Rob, who looks after all the comments and those bits, has actually put together a quick montage thing of what was going on with, or compilation thing of those tracks. So for those of you who like it and want to go and have a proper listen to it, it is on Bandcamp. We did all of it for charity initially. Well, actually, not initially. It was all done for charity. And thanks to everybody's kindness, we've raised over £140 for Calm Campaign for Against Living Miserably. And that's a great thing. And thank you so much for that. And I think also it's actually probably done an awful lot for us lot not living miserably as well.
Certainly. These challenges and just finding creative outlets when you're locked in your house, but you're locked in your house with all your stuff. So what are you going to do with your time? I think it's been fascinating, and it's been great for the performers, but it's really great to see some of the comments that we get, shows, and people who've heard the album, and it's brightened their days as well. And as you say, if we've raised a little money for charity, you can't really ask for too much more than that.
Absolutely not. So let us quickly try and bip on, and let's have the video and get back on track and let you get back to being responsible parents. And Matt, on behalf of Modulate and on behalf of you as one of the people who contributed, thank you so much. And that goes out to all of that crowd.
Thank you.
Yeah. Brilliant. Let's just roll that. Rob, it's somewhere in there, hopefully. So that closes out that particular project, and thank you to everybody who contributed to it, and apologies to some of the artists who've now had to shuffle around because, yeah, poor Matt's got to be a responsible grown-up. Next up, it gives me great pleasure to welcome the incredibly patient Cecilia Sir, who we've sort of bumped back slightly in the schedule, who's an incredible composer, artist, musician, who has a piece called AI versus Human Consciousness, which is imagining a sonic and visual representation of AI's limitations when it comes to conversing with the human consciousness. So I think without further ado, I suggest we jump into this and have a chat with Cecilia afterwards, because she again is in America and is on a busy day. So yeah, if you do have any questions or comments, please do stick them in the chat. And yeah, if you'd like to say anything nice, hopefully we can pass that on. And if you've got any questions that you want to put to Cecilia, because quite frankly, I'm utterly intrigued by it as a piece of work, then please feel free to do that. So next up, Cecilia's AI versus Human Consciousness.
you.
Oh, thank you. That is an amazing piece. I really like that. Dominic, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, well, yeah. My first thought was, God, this is a roller coaster ride, because I was feeling, first off, so uneasy and trepidatious and anxious, and then suddenly found myself feeling so serene and contemplative and something. So these visceral feelings, and I was thinking, is this? And then I thought, this isn't a roller coaster ride. This is the complete opposite, because in a roller coaster ride, I can see what's coming, and I'm just finding myself in these different states of being without any warning. And I don't know how you were doing that, so that was really interesting. And then the other thing was how we talked about the importance of visual in the past piece, and this is so different because you were there performing in front of me, not just you, but this interaction with the visual. So I was thinking, what drew you to that interaction between the sound and the vision, and why did you choose to work that way? Which was great. Really
yeah,
great.
I always try to strive for audiovisual interaction in my performance, but I also, just like a previous artist, I also am a painter myself, and I used to draw, and I guess I'm a creative ADD, if you call it, because I explore so many different genres over the years, and eventually I wanted to kind of anchor them all into one. Like, I didn't want to compromise between art or music. I just like, why not do both? And why not create a ways where I can kind of work with those, synthesize both medium as a way to create more maximizing audience experience, you know? And in this piece, I didn't intend to be in the middle of the screen, but it kind of was a happy accident, because, you know, we were during COVID lockdown, and I was in creating this piece especially for these type of venues where, you know, we're only streaming, we're not able to perform live. So how can I create a work where it still looks presentable, you know? And then it grew on me, and a lot of people were saying something positive about this whole being in the screen and whatnot. So I start experimenting it as a important aspects of my practice, artistic practice, not just like accident anymore. So I like this whole embodiment of visuals and in the background, and me creating sound that can also create live interaction in real time with the visuals, which I think could be a cool effect, you know.
It's such a dramatically different effect to see those visuals changing according to the sound, but see your movement inducing it at the same time. That's so different.
Yeah.
You sort of come across as this polymath auteur, handling all these types of art and delivering it to us so beautifully. Is that what you are? Do you ever collaborate to deliver these different art forms in one piece, or is it always coming straight from you?
It's all coming from me, except that when it comes to technical aspects, like doing more advanced programming, I do work with programmers. I hire them for my project. So I have a certain visions that I have, and then I get frustrated with like making things within Max MSP, and I would hire people to help me out with that aspects. So I have a particular thing that I want to achieve in each project that I do. This one was more like, how do I emulate AI? Is it even possible to have AI communicate with human consciousness? And I'm pretty much saying that there is a limitation. I mean, AI can do lots of great things, but when it comes to coming down to human consciousness, they can't emulate that, because it's, our individual soul and much more than that. So I wanted to kind of show the limitations so that you can hear the coldness and a bit more, machine-like sound in the background, whereas me improvising violin would be more of a human touch. So that's how I try to express the whole interaction between robotic AI versus me being human and just allowing myself to go, so I'm kind of celebrating the human potential that can't be, I guess, copied by machines at the end. Yeah.
Is that a celebration, or is it a fight back? Is it a last stand, a rearguard action of yours? against AI.
Resistance, but at the same time, I don't think it's always a bad thing, because I'm sure there are lots of great work that can come out of AI, machine learning, and I'm interested in that too. So I'm not criticizing it, but just what would be the visual and sonic representation if they were to try to communicate? Because you see like a bunch of what is it called, like Google, where you can talk to the machine and they talk back to you. And we have, what is it called? Is it Alexis or something, like where you tell them what to do and they would say something back to you? And so this is more from the standpoint of a deeper core level of human consciousness. And, yeah.
You think there's an intrinsic link between art, including sound and music, and that deeper core of human existence?
Yeah, I mean, I have a little hard time hearing you, so can you repeat that question?
For you, I'm suggesting that for you, that deep humanness is intrinsically linked with art, sound, music, and all that stuff.
Absolutely.
That's where it resides.
Exactly. I totally, evolution of consciousness, and that kind of yields improvisational outcome, because a lot of musicians and artists that allow themselves to go, they're definitely in certain level of dwelling in certain levels of deeper consciousness. That's how I think. I don't know, several artists and musicians, and then when you go let yourself go, you're kind of in that zone. And what is that zone? If anyone asks, I would consider it as consciousness. And not everyone can reach that, and it depends on, are you prone to reach that level of consciousness? And that's what dictates you as what kind of artist you are, maybe, I don't know. Or if you're even an artist or not, because most non-artists or non-creative people may not even get there, and I don't know.
That was my next question, really, was can we as an audience get there, or is it only an artist who can reach that level? Can we reach it by experiencing your creation?
That's a very philosophical question. Actually, there is a psychologist like Csikszentmihalyi, I think he wrote a book called Flow, and he talks about this whole, like, being in that zone where, like very focused zone, and people, I'm not going to say that non-artists can't reach it. I think they can, but I don't know. I can't scientifically say how or if you are in that zone or not. It's just that my personal outlook on my own creative activity is that it's always like I seem to relate to this notion or the concept of consciousness and improvisation being like very similar thing, that anchor one another, that goes together,
I mean, that feeds into something I was wondering about watching it, which was very much listening to it, especially, you got this real narrative line and flow to what was going on, and it felt like you were going from different environments one to another, or different places, but also within, I mean, especially within the visuals, there was quite a kind of procedural sort of element to them, which balances quite nicely with this idea of this sort of synthetic intelligence and the sort of human consciousness as a sort of dichotomy. But I was actually really quite intrigued as to how much that actually went through what you were doing in terms of creating the actual music and the visual stuff. How much of that is what you've thought out at the top of your head, and how much of it is kind of generated behind the scenes, possibly from the sound of what you're playing? I'm trying not to get too much of a geek going all technical. Is it all done in kind of jitter or whatever? But actually on a more kind of how you created it level.
Yeah. So I work a lot with fixed media. So there is both static and non-static component, both in visuals and sonic elements. Yeah. So there's a fixed video that I created, pre-planned, that's playing in the background. And then there's also fixed media audio track that I created that's playing in the background. So there's both, like, that doesn't change. And then the accidental elements to both sonic and visual aspects is when I create music, based on my amplitude, it's going to react with the visuals. in real time. And also my improvisation obviously is nothing is planned. Only thing that's planned is the backing track of that audio and the video. And programming aspect is where I put all of them together to create a live real-time interaction. But at the end of the day, it is the fixed media that's driving the work, because it's really there as a crutch, and I'm just like allowing myself to be inspired by it, and then improvise on top of it. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was really wondering then, therefore, how much sort of process goes into the mapping out of this timeline that you have there, whether it is kind of that linear impressionistic sort of, oh yeah, it'll do this and it'll do this and it'll do this, or is this something very structured and potentially machine driven?
No, it's not. It's really like a lot of I do is really improvisational, even in video. So I go from like clip, and I manipulate it, blah blah blah. And I'm not trying. I mean, it's interesting. You saw some kind of narration from it, but I didn't intend that. But it somehow came out having some kind of maybe narrative evolution. I don't know, but I definitely created it from kind of as it goes, like improvisational video and sonic, and then we tweak it over and over and over to a point where we're happy with it, and then we kind of let it go. So,
that's brilliant.
When we're watching that, what we just watched then, we see you performing effectively in front of the image. We're left with the impression that you're not making physical movements in order to affect that image, that your physical movements are to affect sound, but then will have a consequence on the image. Is that correct? Or would you actually make a movement or a sound in order to change the image in a certain way?
The amplitude affects the visual. So how I move is not what's going to change the visuals. I mean, there are works like that where your movement actually can do something with it, which is really cool. I would be interested in exploring that too. But for this particular one, it's just the sound I produce that gives.
You wouldn't produce a greater amplitude in order to affect the vision. You're doing that to affect the sound, and that's your primary motivation.
Yeah, how I play and the sound volume and all that is how visual is being moved. I mean, am I answering you correctly? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So, I mean, trying to extrapolate from that, I think, Dominic, you were wondering as to whether you'd actually make a sound different to make the overall image different. I think the answer is yes, you could probably put more downforce through the bow as you're going, but that would be as a secondary result of a creative musical choice. I am totally putting words in people's mouths, but hopefully I'm summing that up.
It's all musical choices you're making, and then we see that affected on the vision.
Yeah.
As a visualization.
But I actually, as I'm performing, I don't get to see, unfortunately, because I'm like behind the screen. Yeah. So I kind of, I wasn't intentionally trying to, I want to have this crushed visual, so I have to make this sound. I mean, as you know, like when you're improvising, you don't really think so much. You just go and hope that it works out with the visuals, and I think it did work out. So.
Oh, very much so. Yes. Have we missed anything out that you feel might be absolutely vital for people to know? I mean, it's been a wonderful chat. Thank you.
No, I mean, I think we've covered it all. It's an interesting chat, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share my work and what it's about.
Oh, thank you so much. Looking at that video, it's a real honor to have you here. So thank you very much for being involved. And yeah, as you can see from some of the comments that are flashing up, there's an awful lot of appreciation for that. So Cecilia, sir, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That is a truly awesome piece of work. I mean, as a violinist and programmer and composer and sort of thing, I might well be biased, but I like that. So, yeah, thank you so much, Cecilia. We are about halfway through, but obviously with the announcement from the Modulate crossover stuff, we're a bit more than halfway through. Very, very quick one whilst we're here. We have got a link for coffee.com, which might well be pottering along the bottom of the screen, which all of us are doing this totally for the fun of it and the enjoyment and the love and sharing stuff and bringing stuff about. However, if you have got a penny, you could help to buy us a coffee at coffee.com to basically fund this digital studio, which we're sort of not virtually sitting in now. That'd be great. Over this year, we've done so well out of that. We've covered our costs, and yeah, we're continuing to do nicely, and that's due to the kindness and whatnot of all of you people out there. We're not making any profit on it, and hopefully we're going to be able to try and use this for other community projects as well. So yeah, if you do have the opportunity, great. If you don't, just give us a like and a share, or indeed just say something nice to one of the artists that you've appreciated. So it all helps. Right, that's enough from me feeling a bit awkward about that, because it always feels a bit strange. But actually, I think it's an important thing, and especially if we can try and build this to something else that other people can start to be able to use as a resource within the community. So that's something that we're trying to think about doing in the future. Right, next up, we have the very, very welcome return of Andrea Andrich and a new piece of his entitled Finger Trace. A little bit about this. It's basically the sound is drawn by hand without any kind of aid, so that you can see what's essentially a waveform and how it gets drawn and modified, and almost like you were trying to carve it into an old vinyl record. And equally, some of the difficulty of doing that by hand in the digital domain kind of gives it its own sort of thumbprint to what it's doing. So without further ado, Andrea Andrich and Finger Trace. Thank you, Andrea. What a fantastic piece. We seem to have lost Dominic momentarily, so hopefully he will reappear. Yeah, welcome back to Oscilloscope. You know,
Thank you. Nice to see you again.
And you, yeah. Yeah, for those people who've not come across your work, I mean, it looks fairly self-evident from that you're once again working on tablet. Oh, we've got Dominic back. It looks like you're working on a phone or a tablet to create these things, rather.
No, it was a touchpad on the laptop, so
Okay.
that's why it's drawn by its finger trace. Otherwise, it would be maybe a pencil trace or
yeah, absolutely. So it's on a relatively crude piece of equipment, in a sense, to try and draw in a meaningful way. So, I mean, what was the thinking behind that? Because I quite like the way that those tools have obviously shaped the work, but also your choice of those tools has in turn done so. I mean, so what? Why? When you could have had all the wonderful, beautiful curved little lines in the world, and you chose to use those for great effect, I might add. I'm just interested as to why you went down that road with it.
I first considered, to actually draw it on paper and then take a photo, and and to go that way. But the thinking behind it was, how this sort of ties in a little bit with Cecilia's work before. How violin is, in a way, the most prized instrument because it is the most human, because it is the least mechanical and the most sensitive to touch. So the less tools. Actually, violin is also the most primitive instrument, in a way, and it is the best. So
Yay!
The more human something it is. No, I mean, I like other instruments as well, and violin is one of my favorites. But generally, violin is considered, at least by some people, to be this most human, most soulful, if you like, instrument. And also in other areas, not just in music. The more many things are advertised as being handmade, and that being handmade is what makes them stand out of all these machine-made things. So I wanted to make the most handmade music, which then it would be the best according to this reasoning. Of course, being handmade also involves implies having skill at making things with your hands, whereas this was more like scribbling. But part that interested me here was that, okay, so you have most control possible with this on the sound form when you draw it entirely by hand. You put your soul into every dot. But also, you, on the other hand, have least control because it's difficult to make proper tones that really have a definite pitch. So that paradox is what interested me for this piece. It was impossible to get the proper pitch, though you can hear like approximate pitches going on as it goes in an arc up and down.
Because I was imagining in my head of that piece, which I actually loved, was you drawing with your finger on this amazing piece of technology that could have got people to the moon and back 5,000 times. But we all know how difficult it is to sign our signature on that thing that the postman brings around. It's impossible. You can't. The line doesn't go where you want it to go. So I was imagining this difference between the violin, like you talk, this hand-built instrument that's full of 10,000 hours or more craft and skill, and you can get perfection on near enough. And yet you're using this really expensive technology to fail to draw what you want to draw. There's no possible way that you could have been getting what you imagined, I'm sure. And yet you produce this wonderful piece of music.
Yeah, you could say that it's difficult to definitely to draw with the finger, but also more difficult than say with a pencil. But also I was thinking about what if you were to draw in sand, and then take like in an experiment that you spend days walking down a very long beach, and you know with a stick maybe you make a waveform behind you, and then you have someone take a photo from the helicopter, and then use computer to transform it.
Wow.
Now there's the next Soundlands.
Yeah, that I was the only thing that I did use, as you noticed, is a copy paste, because each panel is a derivation of the previous one with something being changed. But even this way, it took many hours to draw each of the lines. But I was thinking it would be interesting to do one without any repetitions, though that would be, maybe for some other time.
No, it's quite nice having that repetition in there, because you get a feel more of, I don't know, more of a kind of motif. I fear that if you didn't have repetition in there, it could very quickly become noisy in a very scientific sense. Start to feel quite random, but actually that copy paste repetition gives it some sort of feeling of, I don't know, on some level sort of trajectory, and that by the time you've read something that does something, you sort of,
but I did,
whether consciously or unconsciously, you kind of know roughly where things are going sometimes, which is
Yeah, I did want to sort of compose with it, not just to make a sound experiment. So that's why there is a degree of copy pasting.
So I was intrigued, the quality of the noise, which is quite harsh and mechanical. Is that what you imagined would come out of the act of drawing with your finger waveform on a screen?
Well, of course, I did a few experiments first. Like before I did any experiments, I didn't know what it would sound like. But as I used MS Paint to draw these things, I also used the zoom feature, so that without the zoom feature, you can't get very far with pitch differentiation. Because the low notes, the high notes are pretty difficult to nail. You have to do many up and down.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine. So is that presumably that's not a linear kind of scale, is it? I mean, presumably there's some sort of logarithmic base going to that to get something roughly per octave is
something like that. Yeah, you could say that. Though, of course, as I didn't use a ruler, I can't really tell for any of those. Okay, some of those are more regular, so you can tell there is a kind of a pitch, but it would be extremely difficult to tell which tone, or to like intend a certain tone and then do it without a ruler and some calculation. But rulers and calculations were excluded for this piece, of course, because that was not the goal. But it was also one other aim was to actually, do a piece where you have no idea what the pitches will be, but there is no scale. It's just your hand. Yeah.
And you ended up with something wonderful.
Thanks.
In my mind now, I'm wondering if you were tired and you were composing a piece, or if you were full of energy and you composed a piece, or if you were drunk and composing a piece, would I be able to tell that from the resulting sound score? Because it should come out in your human hand, shouldn't it?
I think you probably would. I mean, yeah, I guess you probably would. I'm not sure how, because I did this in one sober state.
Yeah.
But only if I did like more of these pieces, though. Let's see,
you could use it as some
these are very labor intensive.
Yeah.
So I mean, I was intrigued with that as well. To what extent did you have an idea that this thing might sound like a particular output, or did you kind of go, oh, I've done a few things that do this, now I feel like I need to make something else that looks like it's from a different incarnation or different set of things? So I mean, to what extent are you actually doing stuff based upon their kind of visual contrasts, or what you actually think about as the sound?
Okay, so I did an exercise before this piece. I did like 1 minute of music without any repetition, where I tried out, different, different ways of drawing, and what would come out. So I also discovered that if you want like really high pitch tones, if you like scribble very fast up and down, and that's the only way to get these noisy high pitched tones. That was maybe something that I intended for the culmination of the arc. So it was driven by this was not the first trial in this direction, so I did a couple of sketches before I committed to the complete piece. I actually have somewhere, I haven't remembered to find that, but I have once I did a talk about this piece and some others, and I showed the picture of this waveform and also how the sound looks in Audacity, and I caught the same shape in Audacity and on the picture, just to prove to the audience that what they hear is really, that what you hear is really what you see.
That's really quite interesting. So yeah, I mean, do you have sort of links kicking around somewhere so that people can go and listen to explore more of your work? I know you've sent a few. Where would be the best place for people to go and have a listen or a watch?
For my most recent work, it's Vimeo, but also YouTube. Vimeo and YouTube are the best place to look for my work. I post somewhat regularly.
Brilliant. And I can see in the bottom corner, Rob is frantically scrambling to upload them across the bottom. So hopefully they will pop up any minute.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, there's been sort of, you say somewhat regularly, given the amount of effort that goes into a lot of your stuff. I think it's actually quite prolific. So congratulations.
Thanks.
Dominic, have I stolen the rug from under your feet? Is there anything you want to ask before we say thank you to Andrea?
Just one thing, I suppose, is can you do it two-handedly like this at the same time? And could you work with other people and have a whole orchestra of you doing this?
I actually have an electronic music ensemble which has played here together in August last year. And I am considering to sort of adapt this for our group, but I haven't yet done any of it. But you can also see our stuff on YouTube and Vimeo. so far.
Brilliant. Okay.
Watching the space. Really enjoyed that. Fantastic.
It looks like it's not popping up along the bottom for whatever reason, but Andrea, obviously, feel free to dive in the comments and drop it there so that people can pick up on you. Thank you so much. It's great to have you back again, and
great,
really great.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that brings us towards our final artist. I mean, however, I should say, Dominic, there is another interesting project in the offing, or indeed slowly starting, which you're involved with, and may well be of potentially huge interest for people who follow this. Would you care to expand on the plaspodfer.com stuff, which is going along the bottom? Sorry, I've thrown you to the wolves there. Feel free to drag me back in and tell me to talk about it as well.
I'll try to be really brief, but there's this some of you already know there's this amazing house on Anglesey called Plaspodfer, 100 years old, completely empty, sort of almost derelict, that's been hosting thousands of artists over these past couple of years. By the curator Julie Upmeyer. There's a collaboration.
Who has also co-hosted on here in the past.
Yes, she's been on this very screen.
Yes, she has. You know, it's a great pleasure to have her here.
So there's a project hatched that's going to be happening soon between Soundlands and Plaspodfer, and a bunch of experimental record labels in Wales and Oscilloscope yourself. Two-handed project. First part, we're going to take over 24 hours in June. We're going to get 24 artists to come and animate the house to enable it to send sounds of itself out into the world, if that makes any sense. So for an hour section each of those 24 artists will go into the house and amplify those sounds that the house itself makes, or play the house some way so it's making sounds, and send those sounds out into the world, which is a fantastic thing in itself. And it is an amazing house. It does make really interesting noises, as an empty house would. And then there's a second part of the project, is that those people who are out in the world who might be interested in the house or its sounds or what we're doing, we're inviting them, anyone in the world, to take those sounds and compose them into a new piece of music, sound itself, and then send those back to Plaspodfer, and we will make those into a record with our fantastic partners. So two-part project, artists sending sounds out from Plaspodfer into the world, and then other artists or anyone in the world turning those into wonderful new compositions and sending them back to Wales for us to turn into an album.
So that seemed a lot like preaching to the choir, going, are there artists out there who might be interested in picking up on these sounds and making them into pieces? And quite frankly, I know that there are people watching this right now who may well be interested in it, let alone who might watch on catch up and all those things. So, yeah, if you do get the chance, that's something to keep an eye out for. And that's coming up towards the end of next month, I believe.
Yep. So the first part with this sounds going out is the 26th/27th of June, a 24-hour period. And then you've got until the end of July to send back your completely amazing and very varied, disparate compositions.
Yeah, so there we are. So that's a quick sort of plug for that, but it's not really a plug because I think it might be of interest to an awful lot of the people involved in this. So yeah, and it's nice to have the likes of Dominic around to talk about stuff because it's been really intriguing. So speaking of really intriguing, last up we have a piece by Amor Toriti. Get my head around it eventually as a name, otherwise known as Anil Suba, who is a sound performance artist and curator collaborator based in Kathmandu. So I think he may well rate as, while not the furthest away, possibly the most seemingly remote for us here in Wales. And it's a real pleasure to actually be able to have people and work such as him and his here, you know, because there is no way that I expect many people would be travelling from Kathmandu to a village hall in North Wales where we still in the real world. So that's a real pleasure. We have a piece by him called Chapmanduera as a audiovisual piece. And yeah, without further ado, and we'll have a word with him afterwards if his Wi-Fi stands up, Anil Suba.
Jame
Thank you very much, Anil. That was a great piece. Thank you. Can you hear us? I can't hear me. No, nobody seems to be reacting. Dominic, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Anil, I'm not sure if you can hear us. We have people saying various. I mean, Pablo Perez has come back saying so cool, and David Makin saying fantastic. Anil, can you hear us now?
Yes.
Hi.
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah, hi.
Okay. Yeah, that was a beautiful piece. Thank you so much.
Sorry, I can't hear you properly.
Okay. I was just trying to say it was a beautiful piece. And thank you so very, very much for sending it to us. Hopefully we might well be able to sort out some of the technical gremlins. I will have a quick talk and see. I don't know if maybe Rob or Charles can sort him out. While we are here, we have, okay, maybe Anna is rebooting. That is his Instagram going across the bottom. Dominic, any instant reactions from that? Because I mean, I've got an awful lot, but I know we're slightly papering the cracks here, and I'm throwing you in there. But feel free to bounce it back to me.
Well, I felt like I was in this big, enormous, cavernous cave. You have such a thing.
A cavernous cave.
A cavernous cave.
As opposed to an uncavernous cave.
Exactly. Vaguely post-apocalyptic. Definitely full of thousands of broken things.
Yes.
That didn't even realise they were broken. It was a bit scary. It was a bit scary where I was.
Yeah. I found it kind of progressed from that, though, in that it was quite eventually a surprisingly peaceful sort of work. And I mean, it sort of seems to be something that's slightly underpinned a lot of tonight, in that I know that a lot of Anil's work is quite improvisatory in a sense, and that sort of surprised me looking at this, because it very much feels like the sort of video that is cut and edited and carefully curated frame by frame, and potentially, if you're looking at this from a sound, from a working in a digital workstation or whatever, from a sort of acousmatic electroacoustic point of view, it looks very carefully planned. But actually, there seems a large extent of that linearity that kind of comes about from that wider time frame, just exploring things. And I don't know whether you got that vibe or whether you sort of felt something else. Or...
Well, I felt an odd vibe, actually, because after being in that scary cave, again, I felt myself transported out of it without being aware of being transported out of it. And I found myself in an oddly familiar territory, which was really early 1970s Kraftwerk, and even a bit of OMD, electro pop from the 80s. Bizarrely, did you hear any of
that? To some extent, yes. Which was really quite nice, and it
was soothing, wasn't it? I thought
it was. Yeah. Oh, we might have Anil back. Hello, Anil. Can you hear us now? I think we might have bandwidth issues, but we can see you at least. No. Maybe. I don't know.
Can Anil see the chat?
Can Anil see the chat?
Yes.
Okay.
It's great because in the chat, I just tell everyone that it says "ignore Ed" to Anil. I quite like that bit.
Okay. Yeah. Absolutely. In which case, what I might suggest as a nice compromise is, if you can, as Rob said, Anil, if you can see this, talk about it and ignore Ed, we'll just be grateful to hear you. What I would suggest is, if people have comments or questions for Anil, please stick them in the comments, and hopefully he may well be able to dive in, especially if he's watching this after time. If he's able to download it, we might try and sort of send a copy to him, because I really enjoyed that. And
did you? So I was going through, particularly looking at the videos you said. I was wondering about what the cultural difference is, and I know nothing about this. The cultural difference between Kathmandu, I think that's where he's from, and us here.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. Can you hear us now?
Yeah, I can hear you, but it's not so clear.
Okay. We obviously have bandwidth problems, but
Yeah.
if I because talking is difficult, if people put things in the comments in the chat on the Facebook or the YouTube, would you be happy to try and answer them afterwards? Perhaps. Okay. Okay. We're going to have trouble with this, I think. Yeah, we can hear you. Okay. In which case, Rob and Charles, could you quickly bip something to Anil just to sort of express what I've been trying to express, and hopefully we can join in with everything. Yeah. That was lovely. I really enjoyed that, and it felt like a beautiful piece, and it feels like something to really go back and visit. Yeah, Anil's Instagram is going along there. If anybody wants, I know that I have his SoundCloud and all those links. So if people want me to try and post them after the event, then I certainly will do, as we at the very least owe him that, and it was a beautiful piece. Yeah, it kind of leaves us sort of wrapping up on a bit of a weird one. But
I'm interested in what you, because this cultural difference between Kathmandu and North Wales, maybe
let's have a natter.
With your immense experience pulling in these artists from all over the world.
Yes,
it's a fantastic, amazing job you've been doing. And in this particular scene of experimental music in which you work, how much is it a global scene? How much do cultural differences interfere or benefit from it? Where does it fit? Where does Anil's work fit in that? Because there were cultural elements in there that I might perceive differently than he would, coming from my Western European background.
Absolutely. I mean, I was quite surprised in terms of actually my own perceptions of this as a work coming from him, because we have our call for works and all of those sorts of things, and the wonderful thing is about the call for works is that we can now have people from places such as that, and slightly my jaded arty music side sort of went, oh look, there's somebody doing interesting things with sort of Himalayan drums and gongs and whatnot. Okay, jolly good, and they put a bit of reverb on it. But actually, that was absolutely not the case, because I was looking at this from a Western-centric point of view as us doing a bit of tourism. Whereas all of a sudden, when you have somebody coming from this, where this is their own culture, and addressing from the other side and engaging with a sort of what you would tend to think of as a very sort of once upon a time kind of extending from maybe US, UK, European language and ideals. Or not ideals, no, that's getting to dangerous territory. I'll take that one back. It was genuinely intriguing, and it sort of totally shifted my perception of what was just the same piece of music. And I wanted to hear more, and I'm very grateful that we did. But there is something very interesting about the shared, what we all perceive as the shared language of music, that we've clearly come from totally different backgrounds and perspectives, and that we all kind of have, okay, yes, music is a universal language, until we hear something that we don't understand. And sometimes we don't even know that we don't necessarily understand it, because we perceive it in our own manner. And just how close some of Anil's music was to things that I really did understand, but also felt like I was standing on the other side of the mirror to probably the point that he was coming from, made it feel genuinely intriguing to me, and actually made me want to explore more of his work to try and actually wrap my head around some of that deeper paradigm and methodology to what he is doing and where he's coming from, because it's not necessarily a part of the world that I've explored that much in this context. Yes, we all know the sort of ethnomusicological stuff and all the baggage that comes with and what have you, but actually from a context of now, that's genuinely intriguing and has all this sort of stuff, and it's very cool, and it's nice that we can just do this and share this. Sorry, that was a kind of big rant.
It was great. Do you think it's trite or a truism, perhaps, to say that because you operate in the world of electronic music, I think that's partly how you describe what Oscilloscope does, that an international development of or sharing of music is much easier or more possible, or actually happens, than other forms of music? Because electronic is linked with digital, and digital is how we see them, we communicate in the world now.
I think on a very superficial level, it is far easier in the pool of people that are handing you your dinner. The pool of people that you're dealing with will probably statistically be more likely to get you on the internet or be able to plug you into whatever and access to whatever. I think that when it comes down to those interpersonal relationships, however, and that sort of building of a rapport and an understanding and a trust is a very different thing. I think actually Anil's work proves that in spades, in that to truly get where I think he is coming from, to actually truly feel that I was satisfied in an understanding of what his work was meaning, would take a significant time investment. And that is kind of irrespective of whether you're down the road from somebody who happens to be a fantastic local folk musician, whether you sit and listen to what they're doing and the nuances of it, or whether you try and sit and digest something on the web and go into the backstory and what's available for somebody there. So I think there is a superficial truism in that the electronic side of it is easier to get hold of because there's a set of kind of core competencies that we all have out there. But in terms of performance and in terms of understanding, I think it's probably a lot more in depth than we necessarily may perceive as this transfer of media and concepts and like double-length tweets might suggest, you know. But yeah, that's just my thinking. I mean, spinning that round on you, I mean, you obviously posed that as a question. I mean, what would your thoughts be on that? I don't know.
Well, the thought that just went through my mind, which isn't exactly what you're asking me, never mind, which is that there's an unintended outcome. If you can have an unintended outcome of a pandemic, so there's an unintended outcome of the pandemic where we're all being locked down and not having human interaction with each other or other musicians or going to performances and concerts. But a direct consequence, I think, of the pandemic is for Oscilloscope, for example, is that you've gone to a different platform. You've reached out and connected with international artists that you wouldn't have done before. And perhaps at the end of all this, which goes back to what you were saying, we might be going and having a drink with Anil somewhere or popping off to the States, or they might be coming here, and we might be making those human connections that we would never have done if we continued the way we were before the pandemic.
Absolutely. I totally concur with that. Should we wrap it up on that happy bombshell? You know.
Well, thank you. Before you go, thank you so much for inviting me. It's been a great.
Oh no, it was a pleasure.
And the work that all you people at Oscilloscope have done over the years has just been tremendous. It's made such an impact Wales and beyond.
Oh, thank you.
So
and I mean,
it's
this is also, I mean, without wishing to get too self-congratulatory, it's also building on the kind of local legacy that people such as you have made as well. So yeah, it goes both ways. Anywho, that also makes us kind of go, thank you very much to all the artists involved. So we have Pablo Perez, Cecilia Sir, Andrea Andrich, Anil Suba. We also potentially had Ryan Jordan, who couldn't make it, and well done to him for getting a new job. In the backgrounds, we have Rob Spall and we have Charles Gersham, who between them keep us on the straight and narrow and plug things together. All of those people have friends and family and loved ones and dependents who give them the opportunity to be able to do stuff like this. And that's kind of quite important, you know. And above and beyond that, there's all of you people out there in internet land. So thank you very much to you good people. There is a coffee.com, once again, the final thing of the nasty mercenary bit to throw out there should you wish to help us keep things going. Coming up on the 15th of next month, we have the next deep dive, which is, for those of you that know, is basically one artist, myself and Ben nattering with them on a kind of long form, open-ended podcast type thing about a piece of work of theirs. Hopefully we shall be joined by Dale Perkins, who some of you may know has been here before. It's not totally confirmed yet, but Dale, if you're watching this, please, because we like your work, and you sort of vaguely sounded like you might be up for it back in the day, months ago now, and none of us have got round to sorting it. So yeah, drop us a message or not, as the case may be. Beyond that, Dominic, thank you so much. It's been great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have I forgotten anything that you can think of that I should have said to people?
Oh, you're asking me to look into your mind now. No, I don't think so.
Okay, no, that's a bad place to go. For the artists and people involved, if you want to jump onto, there's a Zoom meeting going on now just to wind down if you want to grab a glass of your favorite tipple if you're not working in America and it's the middle of the day. Yeah, thank you very much. Take care. We hope to see you soon. Good night, everybody.